Hello there and welcome to this presentation about the adrenal fatigue and those 3 stages of fatigue that we've been talking to you about. So the aim of this presentation is to take a truly holistic view of your energy and overall health, which is the naturopathic way. We look at all the factors involved that has led you to be feeling this way. So when I was at my worst, I couldn't function or get through the day. I certainly couldn't think of what I needed to do to help myself, and I just needed someone to guide me, to tell me how I'd got into this position in the first place so I didn't end up back there, and how to help myself climb out of the exhaustion pit so I could live my life again. And I'm here to show you how you can do it too. So let's go through this presentation. So hormones, yes. So adrenal fatigue is very much linked to hormones. We're such busy people these days, and we're taught that we to pop a pill if we're ill and to just kind of crack on with it. But our body knows that there is an issue, and it will start to whisper little signs in the form of symptoms. And these little chemical messengers are hormones that helps us with our energy, metabolism, quality of sleep. And so some of the symptoms that the body starts to express relate to an imbalance in these. Have you ever noticed about yourself little niggles that are starting to occur, such as a drop in energy? Now, this could be at any time of day. You may find that you wake up feeling great, but as your energy decreases and the day progresses, you start to kind of come down a little bit. Or you may be the type of person where you just can't get going in the morning. Or sometimes some people can find that they're good for half a day, but then after lunch their energy plummets until the evening when they pick up again. And this is actually really common, but it doesn't mean that it's normal. These are signs that your body is out of balance. What about your mood? So have you noticed times when you feel really low, or have you started to get irritable and tense, perhaps shouting at those around you? Don't feel guilty or too bad about this, because these are some of the symptoms, and I've been there. I've had people on the other side of this, but there are things that we can do about it, and that's what this is all about, this presentation. So do these mood changes relate to your cycle, or have you seen a pattern in feeling anxious or low? So the food diary is also a good way to kind of track your mood as well as what food you're having. For the females, what about your periods? Have you noticed if they're getting heavier, lighter, longer, shorter, more sporadic, or whichever? So whether you are still having periods or not, the body still goes through a natural cycle, a rhythm that is controlled by the moon cycles. So although that sounds a little bit hippie, the moon has a gravitational pull on the water content of the body. That's how it controls tides. So our body is made up of 60% water. The brain and the heart are composed of 73% water and the lungs 83%. The skin contains 64% water, muscles and kidneys are 79%, and even the bones are watery at 31%. So you will be experiencing monthly cycles whether you have a menstrual cycle or not. So let me ask you, have you noticed a change over the past year or so? What about around your abdomen? Do you notice it swell every so often? Can you feel quite bloated, gassy and uncomfortable? And has there been any weight changes in your distribution? So these are other symptoms along with the ones that we talked about earlier. But it's not that you might have all of them, you might have some of them. It depends what stage you're at. So is weight starting to settle in places never used to, maybe particularly around the middle? That's something that we'll talk about. All of these things are controlled by your hormones. So let's take a deeper look into that. So what are the main hormones then? The body communicates via hormone messengers, and each is reliant on the other. They're all intertwined in this whole endocrine system. So for example, if someone doesn't have a bowel movement several times a day and eats a really poor diet or is exposed to lots of toxins, the liver can struggle to metabolize the chemicals. So they can get sent around the bloodstream unmetabolized and will settle in fatty glands, which cause havoc to the reproductive hormones. So good gut health means that the bowel is eliminating 2 to 3 times a day. Are you doing this? And that the diet contains pre and probiotic foods, which I'll come on to give you some tips about as well. as the good bacteria helps with the estrogen metabolism. So the food choices and consistency of meals affects the blood sugar. That's why it's so important to spread out your food throughout the day. So it's the blood sugar, and it's the blood sugar that drives underlying energy. So imagine the wheels of a bike. The back wheel drives the front wheel. Well, the blood sugar is the back wheel to the adrenal gland. So if your body and your blood sugar is unstable and your body interprets this as stressful, then your adrenal glands are feeling stressed, and then they don't signal correctly to the thyroid glands. So you can see here how it's all linked. Okay, so let's just work through those a little bit here. The adrenal glands then, and the stress response. The adrenal glands control our stress response and are responsible for all our energy levels and pain threshold. So that's why sometimes you get it can move into fibromyalgia, for example, which is about pain, a little bit of pain in the body, sometimes a lot of pain in the body. And again, that's something I'll come on to later. But feeling stressed causes the pulse, the blood pressure and breathing to become more rapid, which are the classic symptoms of a panic attack. So this is why sometimes people feel like something's happening with them, or they think it might be their mind, but there can be things that's going on in the body. The pituitary gland in the brain increases its production of hormones in this case, which stimulates the release of cortisol. This stress hormone inhibits the white blood cells and suppresses the immune system. So that is why one of the symptoms of adrenal fatigue is getting ill all the time, something that I certainly experience. So if you are not the type of person to experience panic attacks, but you experience long-term stress, we know that digestion slows or stops. Fats and sugars are released from stores in the body, cholesterol levels rise, and the composition of blood changes slightly, making it more prone to clotting. Okay, so long-term and short-term stress can have a detrimental effect, which estimates that stress contributes to as much as 80% of cardiovascular disease and can also contribute to cancer, endocrine disorders, and infectious ailments. The interesting thing, though, is that adrenal glands don't distinguish between physical stress, such as over-exercise, dehydration, poor diet, a toxic environment, or an injury, emotional stress from feeling lonely, juggling too many roles in life, living in a stressful home environment, or even feeling bereaved. And so this is why it's really important to start looking at the different stresses in your life. And this is where the timeline comes into the whole process. Sitting and doing your timeline itself can bring up a lot of emotions and a lot of kind of memories. It can even start to come out in your sleep. But it is also important to take a look back at your life and see where the main stresses occurred, whilst remembering that it's not just those big stresses in life that impact us, but it can be the daily grind as well, that we've kind of come to learn and know is normal. It's absolutely not. So the impact of chronic stress then. Well, over the long term, the symptoms can be mild or severe and can be quite varied. So can you identify with any of these things? Brain fog, lack of focus, mood swings, depression or anxiety? What about a low thyroid function? Do you feel the cold easily? I know I do. Or struggle to contain your internal thermostat? Do you experience dry or thinning hair? Are you missing the outer third of your eyebrow? Okay, this is linked to the thyroid here. Have you been gaining weight or not able to lose weight? Do you feel shaky if you skip a meal? Or do you find yourself reaching for an afternoon pick-me-up? What about your energy levels? Are they sustained, or do you find yourself having highs and lows throughout the day? How is your sleep pattern? Do you struggle to drop off, or are you out like a light, only to wake up after a couple of hours and lie there until the early hours? Do you feel refreshed in the morning when you wake up? And we also have a quiz for this. So there's a quiz part of the testing, which is part 2 of this bundle, where you can actually get into detail about the symptoms that you're experiencing, and I will get back to you with an individual response or my intuition of where you are. Of course, without doing the actual saliva test, we don't know where your cortisol levels are for sure, but you can probably get a good idea by moving through this bundle. Okay, so let me see if I can move my little screen somewhere so you can see here the whole screen. Okay, so let's talk about a bit about anxiety. Now, a whole separate workshop and presentation on this, because as many of you know, anxiety is a big part of what I help people with. And in part 3, the solution part, there's lots of practical things that I advise you to do, as well as the bits that you can read, yoga, meditation, and all sorts of other things that are not like yoga and meditation that can help you with anxiety, like the ability to say no, for example. But for the purpose of this particular presentation, I also want to know if you've ever been to see your doctor, because that's the most important thing to do in terms of when you're feeling exhausted, because there could be underlying factors that you've never looked at before. Although in many cases results do come back negative, which of course is a really good result, but it does lead to confusion sometimes when you're not getting the answers that you're looking for. But if you do go to the doctor, there'll be a number of things that you and your doctor will likely test, and that will be through blood tests. By the time that you either come to see myself or a naturopathic doctor, they've usually been told that it's just anxiety because of the results coming back clear, and told you to go on antidepressants. Now, this may be a good option for you. There is no rights or wrongs in what time or situation to go ahead and do that. I'm not for or against, and I believe in both options. But what about the things that you can do for yourself alongside your doctor's advice? Sometimes it's nice to know that the physical symptoms you're experiencing are because your body is out of balance. So, if you're not eating the right foods, that can cause anxiety, for example. So let's look at the types of, I'm going to pull my image off here so you can see again, types of things that you might be noticing, such as chest pains, palpitations, dizziness, a feeling of dread, nausea, hot flushes, what we call air hunger, when deep breathing inwardly doesn't satisfy your need for air, when you're like, you just can't catch your breath, and even a sensation of zoning out at times, or brain fog, or a really weird feeling of distorted passage of time. These are symptoms of all things typical for someone experiencing anxiety, plus lots of other individual symptoms as well. Let's firstly look what anxiety is. It can affect twice as many as women as it can men, but at the same time, men are far less likely to report or even acknowledge that they have an issue of this nature. So anxiety can be acute or chronic, and may show as episodes of panic attacks where the whole fight or flight reaction occurs at the wrong time, which is an involuntary physiological response. So more on that later about the cortex and the amygdala approach with anxiety. But many people say that they have no reason to be feeling this way when they have a panic attack, or that they're anxious or worried, that they could be relaxing in the evening when the body suddenly goes into an emergency situation, and they can feel their heart palpitations, chest pain, dizziness, and all the symptoms I've mentioned, possibly even with hair loss and weight gain. So they can be quite abrupt episodes and intense and very unpredictable. And hopefully your GP has ruled out anything serious and told you it's just anxiety. But what does that mean? Why is it happening? And how can you help yourself? So let's just go back one here. Okay, why are some people more predisposed to stress? Okay, so you might just notice that yourself or people around you seem to be a little bit more stressful. Okay, well, perhaps it's from early life stresses, we're going to be looking a little bit deeper into this, but maybe it has been more recently where, for example, yourself, you've just felt more overwhelmed at a specific event, such as every time you have to give a talk at work, or every time you're in a major supermarket. Or maybe it's a certain situation, such as driving on a motorway, when you notice your body going into fight or flight. Maybe it's just generally crowds of people, or hearing traffic noise, or recent pain or injury can also bring on anxiety, okay, and stress in the body. And as I say, in part 3, when we look at some solutions to this, I'll be offering some techniques around this. But it may be temporary stresses which are having a physical effect on your body. Pressures at work, relationship issues, money issues, loneliness, or maybe for you it's been temporary feeling of overwhelm due to accumulation of issues, such as a big event like a moving house, preparing for a holiday, starting a new job, or the birth or adoption of a child. So hormonal changes are a big contributing factor as well. And I've had lots of lovely ladies say to me that I don't recognise myself anymore. Since the menopause, I don't feel confident to drive long distances, or I feel overwhelmed at the thought of large crowds, or so anxious these days, and I never used to be. So in that case, before we move on, again, it's things in the body that can have an impact on your anxiety. It's not always the mind that is causing anxiety, and that's why it's so important to look at yourself holistically and not rule anything out. And of course, most importantly, and the 3 things that I'll be advising all the way through this bundle, is looking at your nutrition, supplements or deficiencies, and removing stresses. Of course, like exercise and things comes into this as well, but they kind of fall under each of these different elements. What constitutes as stress for the body for somebody with exercise can be relaxation for somebody else, and that really just does depend on where you are in your adrenal fatigue. Okay, so the body whispers, and I love this term that is used by Gabby, and I use a similar thing when it comes to the mind, which is mind niggles. So your body will let you know if it's not happy, so you just need to listen to yourself and see if you can identify some of the signs of imbalance. So some of the signs, and this is definitely one for me, is tight shoulders. That's why I do a lot of that with yoga, release. And that can actually be contributing to your headache or insomnia, and vice versa. So if you're sleeping funny, that can actually contribute to your headaches and your neck pain. I have a whole section on headaches as well, which is one of the symptoms that I certainly had a lot of. Maybe there's a change in your breath. Maybe it's not as sweet as it could be, and in that case it could be that the gut flora has changed. That's one of the symptoms of that. Or maybe you've noticed some darker circles under your eyes, or even that your eyes are becoming yellow. So grab a mirror, just be kind to yourself while you're critiquing, but start to look at some of these things that we are about to go through. And this is a wonderful way of testing yourself without having to pay for anything extra, and just to look at trying to identify where you are in this adrenal fatigue. So other kind of obvious symptoms here is, especially when it comes back to the shoulders, it's like you're carrying the weight of the world. So it's like you're kind of hunching your shoulders, and you're in this fight and flight, and you don't feel safe or comfortable to actually just relax into your body. It's like you're waiting for that punch, and that's why some people can hold that in the stomach there. It's like constantly holding on and tensing the stomach in anticipation of being punched. So you could be feeling on edge or nervous. So certainly for me, I couldn't watch any horror movies. I still struggle with that to some extent, but anything that was too jumpy, even action films, honestly thought I was really just a wuss. But also I don't think it's that healthy to be watching horrors and action and psychological thrills all the time. So it's something else to be mindful of. It's what you're putting into your body is just as important as what you're putting into your mind. So on edge or nervous, maybe you jump easily, or maybe you get easily shocked. And that can be causing irritation and a negative behaviour as well. Maybe, you're sitting at your desk all day, and this is one of the issues as well. So maybe you're scrolling through your phone and you're just having your head down. Is there an addiction to your phone? And as we said about sleeping position, So a poor posture can be a contributing factor to your whole body interpreting something as stressful. That is another stressor that the adrenal glands cannot differentiate between other types of stress. So observe how you react to situations. Do you withdraw because you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel as though you perhaps hold on to things and perhaps obsess about something that has been and gone? How many of us can relate to this? Now, there are definitely techniques that I can talk you through on how to work with this. But certainly, if you're feeling anxiety in your body caused by poor diet or supplements or allergies or these kind of things, then you're already in a position to be extra nervous or extra sensitive, and that can impact your mind. So what language are you using towards yourself? Would you speak to yourself the way that you would speak? Would you speak to somebody else the way that you would speak to yourself? And that comes towards some NLP stuff that we'll be going through, neuro-linguistic programming, looking at how we can actually change those words.